Who's the Bhakti Yoga Studio owner? It has a nice feel. And besides it's warm, it's something else outside, but the ambience is really nice. Compliments to you and your chef. Sorry about the size of the screen. It's a little small for the size of the space here, but you can see it okay, yeah? Okay. You recognize the picture that's on the screen? It's the cover picture, or it's one of the pictures, of Krishna and Arjuna on a chariot. It's an illustration to depict Bhagavad Gita, and that's what I'd like to speak about. Well, messages from the Bhagavad Gita. Because one of the ways to describe the Bhagavad Gita is it's a treatise on yoga. And part of the yoga, a major part of the yoga that circulates all over the world these days, is taken from chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. Because yoga systems, they move progressively, like steps on a staircase or a ladder, and they lead to higher and higher forms of yoga. So most yoga that's taught in yoga classes and yoga studios is hatha yoga, or asanas, combination of asanas and pranayama, breathing. And that's two parts of the Eightfold Yoga System, which is chapter 6. Ashtanga Yoga. So a reason for presenting Bhagavad Gita to you is because it's connected to yoga. Yoga systems are described in Bhagavad Gita. And I'm going to show you another image here. This is my teacher, my spiritual master. A few decades ago, I was a student at the University of Buffalo. That's where I was introduced. And more than 50 years later, I'm still here doing the same thing. I don't have a yoga studio. So from him, in fact, he visited the campus even before there was the Amherst campus, it was just the Main Street campus. And he came together with Allen Ginsberg. Some of you are older generation folks, you know who Allen Ginsberg is. Younger generation folks, you know who Allen Ginsberg is. Okay, great. I didn't know anything about anything. I was passing through Northern Union, the main student center, and over on the right-hand side, I was going to visit a friend. So over there in the Millard Fillmore room, there was this crowd of people around the door. So what's going on in there? So I kind of wiggled my way through the crowd of people at the door. And on the stage, over on the left-hand side, a little bit of a raised platform, was Allen Ginsberg playing bongo drums. And I knew who he was because I had seen his picture before. And it was kind of celebrity. And then right next to me was somebody I never saw before. That was my spiritual master later. And they were just chanting Hare Krishna like all of you were doing. And it was very charming. People were intoxicated like anything during those days. I mean, without going into it, Allen Ginsberg and LSD and everything. And the chanting went on for quite some time because people were very intoxicated. The speaking was very short. And there was an invitation to come to the center of this right across the street on Englewood Avenue. And that was, and they served prashadam at the end. So that was my intro, and I didn't know anything. But just sharing with you, in retrospect, that sound vibration had a transformational effect. Spiritual sound has a transformational effect. So here I am, sharing some spiritual sound with you. Here's, I like this image. Over on the left side is the embryo within a womb, and over on the right side is a skull. And in between is a space, and it's called life. Between birth and death is what we do with our life. And life has some problems, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on finding solutions to those problems. Here's a little list. Who am I? What is the standard of true happiness? At RIT, I spent about an hour just discussing that topic. Search for happiness. Because everyone wants to be happy. What's the true standard of happiness? What's my personal purpose in life? It's important. Am I living the life of others' expectations? To a degree we are. How do I solve the real problems of life? There's going to be, I didn't provide it yet, but I'm going to send you a PDF that looks like this, and it's one of those, you click on this, and it takes you to where in the Bhagavad Gita. It's available online. It takes you to the solution that's in Bhagavad Gita for anger, depression, greed, practicing forgiveness, demotivation, uncontrolled mind, pride, etc., etc. It's a practical guide to addressing problems of life through the yoga system. So I think you find that useful. What do you call it? Hyperlinked? Yes? Click, it takes you to a database, supported material where you can find answers. The whole Bhagavad Gita. Here's another nice painting. You can see okay back there? Next time we'll have a big screen. The scene is, here's Krishna, and there's Arjuna in their chariot. And at the very first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks Krishna, please run my chariot between two armies. I want to see what's happening here. And when he sees what's arrayed, it's too much. And he says, I'm out of here. I can't do this. And he gives 7 good reasons why, ethical reasons why, compelling reasons why he's out of there. And then they have some discussion back and forth about life. Like, what's important and how do you make decisions. So what's the goal of life? And practice in daily life. Here's a nice painting. At the very bottom, it's a small screen. At the very bottom is a blind man. The blind man has a name. His name is Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is the eldest brother of the older generation. And because he was born blind, although he was the eldest son, generally speaking, the eldest son would become the next king, but he was born blind, so he couldn't become king. But he can't become king, I want my sons to become king. So his sons were corrupt. There's the good guys, bad guys story. They were the bad guys. They didn't live by virtue, they lived by skullduggery. In royal dress, royal skullduggery, murder, many things. And then there's the good guys. And there's the sons of his next younger brother. And there was a dispute over who would become the successor to the throne, and it ended up in a war. Their attempt for peaceful settlements, the bad guys, fellow Duryodhana said, I can't live on the same planet with those people. It was going to be war. So there was a war, or there was a plan for war. And interesting, the person in this blue garment speaking to him, his name is Sanjaya. And Sanjaya was a mystic. Sanjaya had the ability to sit in one place and know what was going on in another place. You know, clairvoyance or something like that. He had a TV in his heart. He could see and hear what's going on in a distant place. So he was the assistant to the blind king. So he's narrating everything to Dhritarashtra. Like, who said what to whom, what was the reply, and what, what's going on out there on the battlefield, because they weren't on the battlefield, they were sitting in his little place. So that's the setting. And this is the chapter 1 picture. Arjuna is saying, here's my reasons why I can't do this. He drops his bow and says, I shall not fight. And back and forth, and finally he comes to the point where he says to Krishna, I don't know what's best for me. And I'm going to submit myself to you. You're my dearest friend, but you're also extremely wise, and so I'm going to just present my dilemma to you so you can direct me. And that's the Bhagavad Gita. That's the setting. And then when Bhagavad Gita begins, then the teachings begin. So Bhagavad Gita, by the way, it's literally in the middle of a big, going both directions, big history. Big history of Greater India, called Great Mahabharata. Mahabharata? Yes, no?
Yes.
Maybe?
No.
Sound familiar?
No.
Mahabharata. Bhagavad Gita is the philosophical portion, and the other parts, the left and the right side, is teaching codes of conduct. Here's ethics, here's standards by which one should live, and illustrating them by the good guys and the bad guys. So it's history, literally history, but it's teachings of good conduct, developing character, or what happens when it's not there, what good behavior like. So there's the philosophical portion, and specifically, again, it's speaking about yoga, because yoga is a Sanskrit word that means linking or connecting with the place of higher consciousness, or connecting with the Supreme. So here's this Bhagavad Gita. This is a detail you don't need to know, but it's nice. This Bhagavad Gita was prepared by my spiritual master for English language people, and he largely refers to the commentaries by two previous great scholars or acharyas. One's pictured to the left, and another picture on the right. You don't need to know. Well, the names are Vishwanath Chakravarti and Maladev. They're very, very prolific and very authoritative, and so he drew upon their writings. And the one on the right side is the younger generation one, and largely he dedicated the book to Baladev. He dedicated his translation to Baladev, because Baladev followed a classical system where the whole of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita are broken down into 5 main topics. So I'm going to take you through those slowly. So you have a picture of what's in Bhagavad Gita along with the yoga part. Here's the 5 main topics. Ishvara, or the Supreme, on the right is the soul, further on the right is material nature, at the bottom is time, and over on the left side is karma. So those are the 5 topics. Karma you all know. time you won't know. So the soul, it's not, we know what souls are, but it's it's an important topic of Bhagavad Gita. And the Supreme and material nature, those are the five. So quickly, here's a nice illustration. This is easy to understand. This is explaining a verse from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is saying material nature has 8 divisions. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, as this fellow zooming through space. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, and sky. That's 5. So 5 plus 3 makes 8. So there's 8. The 3 are subtle. Mind, intelligence, and our dear friend, false ego. Mind, intelligence, and false ego is the subtle body, and the gross body is earth, water, fire, air, and ether or sky, Akash in Sanskrit. And along with the gross and subtle body, you can see there's the soul, and side by side with the soul is the Supreme Soul, or Atma, and Param Atma. With that makes up every body, whether it's a human body or any other form of life. It has those 8 plus the soul and Paramatma. And yoga is to, first of all, identify not with the body, which is very strong as identification with the body, but instead identifying with the soul, and then the connection with the Supreme Soul. In the process of meditation, the eightfold yoga system that I mentioned, the last 3 of the 8 are stages of meditation. And meditation focused finally upon that Paramatma. Beginning, intermediate, and very, very focused. Samadhi, trance, on Paramatma. So that's taught in chapter 6 Bhagavad Gita and chapter 7. I like this image, so I'll explain. It's a clay cup that has a little ghee wick or wick of flame stuck in it, and for me it represents something that I heard my spiritual master say. This is about the soul. He said on a number of occasions, the soul is both conscious and consciousness. And I thought, that's cool, but what does it mean? The soul is conscious and consciousness. And he said it enough times that I thought, gee, this must be important. So I tried to understand it. Finally, I came across an explanation that resonated. So I'm going to share that with you. There's a text in the Upanishads that says that the soul is like a lamp, is itself luminous, and it lights up objects in the room, like pots and plates. Similarly, the soul is conscious, that's the luminous, and it extends that consciousness into what's beyond the conscious self. The consciousness extends, into the room, or sound, through the senses. Consciousness is extending out, but it's coming from the soul that's conscious, and so both, the soul is both conscious and consciousness. So our presence, however many of us are here, we're conscious being, but consciousness is also spreading. And it's really nice to have, harmonious consciousness. That's part of what yoga helps one get to that place where consciousness becomes harmonious and in accord with higher laws of consciousness, higher laws of nature, higher laws of the Supreme. That's yoga. But so that's what the soul is, whether consciousness is high or low. The soul is both conscious and consciousness. That's something about the soul. And here's something else about the soul. Along with the soul is very tiny. again from the Upanishads. The soul is, you take the tip of a hair, not just the very, very point tip of a hair, and cut that into 100 parts. You take one of those parts and cut it into 100 parts, and that's the size of the soul. Keshagasatabagasha. It's very tiny, 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 but very powerful, 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 because it animates not only the body of a bug or the body of a human, the body of an elephant, or body of any entity. It's the force that moves matter and is conscious and extends consciousness. So it's good to harmonize all of that consciousness. However, the consciousness of the individual soul often, in this material atmosphere particularly, it identifies with matter. The tendency is to think of ourselves in terms of recovering rather than who we are. It's okay, we have a body, but it's not who we are. Here's a nice example. You can see I like visions. There's an egg, and there's some light coming out of that egg. What's that light coming out of the egg? That's the luminosity, or the consciousness from the conscious entity. So consciousness is extending out. And the whole idea of yoga is not that you dismantle the body, but you make that consciousness such that it no longer identifies with the body. It's there, and you perceive, the pains and pleasures of the body, and the subtle body, the mind, the pains and pleasures, the happiness and distress in the mind. That is not who you are. That's something about the soul. And where the Bhagavad Gita is meant to take us, and practicing yoga is meant to take us, where there's clear, increasing clarity about our real identity. That's Bhagavad Gita. And here's some characteristics also described in Bhagavad Gita. The soul can be experienced or perceived by the presence of consciousness. Many spiritual traditions of the world accept consciousness as being a symptom of the soul. But I'm going further, it's not just a symptom of the soul, it is the soul. At the time of death, all physical and chemical components of the body remain in place, but something non-physical has been lost. So death means the soul departs. Even though in our language, we identify ourselves as being different from the body, like you say, my hand, my leg, my head, my arm, my stomach, but there's the object and the possessor of the object, like my shirt, and there's the possessor of the shirt. So in our language, it's also, we're different than the body. However, in our behavior, it's very much identifying with the body. This is an illustration of an out-of-body experience at Emory University. There's a little story. Dr. Michael Savam, some of you know about out-of-body experiences, I imagine, right? OBE, they got an acronym for it. Okay, so I'll just go through it a little bit. I read 4 books. I was very interested in this at one time. When medical doctors who very much are involved in bodies have some epiphany about you're not the body, and kind of like a disbelief. So that's what happened to Dr. Savam. Emory University, heart surgeon, and in the middle of one heart surgery, there was cardiac arrest, means the heart stops. So they have a procedure to try to get the heart to artificially work as if it was working properly. So they put some electrodes or some things on the chest of the person, and they do this and that and the other thing, and then if the patient survives, they can go ahead with the heart surgery. And then, they go to the doctor went to visit his patient afterwards. How you doing? You know, doctor, bedside manner. And the patient described to him what happened during the surgery. And he described, in details and details and details. And the doctor said, how do you know all this? I was watching from up above. And he knew the details and details of what this one said, what that one did, so forth and so on. It was like that. So, what's the explanation? So he consulted, did some research, a few years passed, and there's several hundred experiences of other heart surgeon doctors that had their patients report OBEs. So he went through this whole book on it, and his conclusion was, I don't know what else to say, because kind of like he was reluctant to say, but it looked like the seat of consciousness is something other than the body. This is what the point. It's like that egg and the jewel thing outside. That's what that is. So what's the thing looking down? That's the subtle body. What's the subtle body? It's mind, intelligence, and false ego. When the gross body is kaput, the subtle body isn't. The subtle body carries the soul to its next destination. Or, if it's in this case, it comes back to the same body. And there's several books. One I really like, I'll just do it quickly. A lady that's also a heart surgeon somewhere in Seattle had a similar experience, but in this case, the patient didn't just rise above the operating table, they floated across the ceiling, out the window, and up 3 flights, and they were looking inside the janitor's closet. The patient described to the physician later what they saw, where everything was inside the janitor's closet. And they saw the little ledge above the janitor's closet that had a pair of shoes. They described that, the shoelaces that didn't match on the pair of sneakers that were on the ledge outside the janitor's closet. She's like, what? She went to the janitor and said, well, I keep this place locked. You can't get in. But sure enough, the description of what was in, and sure enough, going out, looking out above, there's a little ledge, and there was a pair of sneakers with unmatching shoelaces. So the person didn't make it up. So what's going on? And so the point is, seat of consciousness is something other than the body. And some persons have that experience. And they even have a memory. And they have vision and audio, they can hear and they can see without the use of their senses. Isn't that far out? I think it's far out. That means there's subtle sense and there's the instrument through which sense perception goes. There's the eye and there's the power of sight. It's subtle. There's hearing, there's the ear, and then there's the power of hearing. That's different than the instrument, the physical body. It's going on in the subtle plane and it's arising from the soul, the seat of consciousness. So back again to Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of Bhagavad Gita is by different yoga systems to come to the realization and be in the awareness of who we really are, even while we're moving about in our bodies and our minds doing what minds do. There's a nice illustration. This is some of you, if you ever visit Los Angeles, I encourage you to visit the Los Angeles Hare Krishna temple. There's a wonderful Govinda's restaurant, fantastic vegetarian food. And right next to the restaurant is this museum. And inside the museum, one of the first exhibits is this one. And I went, just because I was curious, and when you walk in, there's behind glass walls or glass exhibit spaces, there's something on the other side.
So when you walk into this one, it's dark, because it's like a hallway, and all of a sudden the light goes out. And I'm thinking, gosh, we're not in India, what's going on? The lights just went out. And then there was some dreamy music, and there's a light that's on the opposite side. There's a mylar mirror, so you then look like a mirror. And everybody's standing there, seeing the exhibit, looking at each other in the mirror. And the voice, deep, resonating British voice says, "Who are you, really? Are you that body?" And then everyone can see their bodies. Or are you something else? And then some music. And then the light goes out again, and then instead comes a light that focuses, spotlight focuses on the little one in the beginning stages, the child that's within the womb. And you hear a heartbeat, dun, 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 dun. And then you see a spark that comes on, the little light. That light goes down, and the next one that goes on is little baby. You hear baby crying. So then that light goes down, and the little boy bouncing the ball, and you hear kids. So you get the idea is the soul is passing in different stages of life, and then when you get to the far end, you hear an old man coughing, and then the soul leaves. So it may not come at old age, it may come at any time, but the real self, this is Bhagavad Gita's teaching. It's right in a verse in Bhagavad Gita. One of the first teaching Krishna gives. Dehi nosmin yata dehi kumaram yoganam jara. The soul is passing through these different stages, and also at the time when the final change of body takes place, the soul goes to another body, or the womb of another mother to take birth, in whatever that species is. And that womb is the womb of material nature. Whatever mothers there are, whatever species there are, it's just different combinations of material nature. Or in Sanskrit, that's Prakriti. And how does Prakriti work? Prakriti works by two laws. Karma, which you all know, and then the other law is guna in Sanskrit, which means modes of nature. So those three ladies over here, one is dressed in yellow, another is dressed in red, another is dressed in blue. Those are like the three primary colors. Some of you know about primary colors. You learned it in 9th grade science class or art school. You mix those three colors, you get any color. Without elaborating because of time. Similarly, material nature works by those three modes. Goodness is the yellow one. Passion is the red one. And ignorance is the blue one. And they're in combinations. So we're all, to some degree or another, influenced by those modes of nature. And the modes of nature move Prakriti. The modes move material nature, like the painting is showing. They're puppeteers, and there's puppets. And one guy over here is thinking he's the laborer, and the other one is thinking he's the capitalist. So we're in different roles, and according to material nature. And above both, the director of material nature, this is Bhagavad Gita, just illustrated in a painting. There's the director of the modes of nature. Mayadhyakshena Prakriti, there's the Prakriti. He's the director of Prakriti, that's Krishna. And that's the controller. So material nature is working under the controller. And now we just covered 3 of the topics, then 4 of the topics. The one that's not just time. So there's the soul, there's material nature, there's karma, material activity, and there's the supreme controller of all of this. Then now we're going to speak about time. I'm fascinated by time, so you may not be, but bear with me. There's more verses in Bhagavad Gita about the modes of nature than anything else, because there's very, very strong influence. But time is also a very strong influence. And who has seen time? We know that time is acting. We can measure time in various ways, like the movements of the hands of the clock, or digital clocks, just time is passing, time is passing. What is time anyways? So one of the measures of time, this is from stepping back a little bit, the measure from the Vedas, the measure of the smallest unit of time is the measure of the movement of the sun crossing one atom. The atom's pretty tiny, so it doesn't take long for the sun to pass over one atom. Whatever that is, that's the smallest unit of time. And so many of those makes another, and so many of those makes another, and so many of those makes another. And that's the Vedic conception of the movement of the sun is measured by time. And as time moves, things come into being, and things are destroyed. And for some time they stay, but they're moving all the time. Moving all the time. Just getting in the car and coming over here, all these memories of, 50 years ago when I was in college was going through my mind. And I'm sure things look a lot different. I'm sure. But some of the names of the streets are there, and but lots has changed because time moves things. And any one of us. Time moves things. We were younger and now we're where we are, and then time moves things. Nothing happens without time. And wait a while and just stand still and things change because time is moving things. So use it well. Time is God's energy. Time is the most powerful force in the material world and is the ultimate among killers. Time I am, Kabosmi, from Bhagavad Gita. It's the cause of the transformation of material nature, Prakriti. The universe, time moves in cycles. There's small ones, medium ones, there's really big ones. The really biggest ones is creation and then annihilation. And then there's, days, and there's months, there's years. There's time moves in cycles and keeps moving around and around and around. And those movements of time bring transformation. That's described. 6 kinds of transformations due to time. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, Krishna says, "Time I am, the great destroyer of the worlds. Under the influence of the eternal time, the cosmic manifestation is created, maintained, and annihilated at regular intervals." So, we haven't seen time, but here's an artist's attempt to illustrate what time would play. A big guy looks like Abraham Lincoln on the Lincoln Memorial sitting at a big chair, and things are being decided by Mr. Time. Or here's another. The time brings about creation and earth brings about destruction. Here's another picture of time. Grim Reaper. The face of death. Kala means time. Rupa means form. So there he is. The form of time. Another one. Now, you may not be interested, so if you're not, you can tune out, but I'm interested in how people, before they had GPSs and things like that, how they navigated their way. And this is one of the systems of navigation. Like supposing you're in a ship, and you don't have whatever people have today for navigating in a ship, they had this thing. It's called an astrolabe. And they had people that know how to use it. Obviously, you have to have a navigator on the ship. But it has different parts that move. And there's signs of the zodiac that are inscribed on the parts. Here you can find this on the internet. I'm not going to spend too much time. The main idea is to know where you are. If you can see the sky, if it's not, at night, out the sea, as long as it's not cloudy, you can see the stars very well. And you can see what direction you're moving in based upon your compass. You need a compass. You look at the stars, and then you can tell where you are, and it tells you what direction to move in, where you want to go. Supposing there's a big wind and pushes the ship this way or that way, you can still navigate your way by using this instrument. So I'm not going to do all this detail. Here's a nice painting of a temple that's being built in West Bengal, that on one side is a planetarium. What's a planetarium? It's a structure that shows the structure of the universe. But it's going to be showing the structure of the universe according to Vedic picture. Now the Vedic picture and the Western astronomical picture they differ, but there's lots of similarities. But there's quite different, and I'm going to show you really quickly a short video that's depicting what's going to go inside that thing. It's based on the movements of the sun. So I'll use my hands a little bit. The Vedic picture of the structure of the universe is the earth is a mandala. You know what a mandala is? Mandala is a geometric thing that it's balanced, it looks the same from all directions. So the earthly planetary system is in the middle, and a place called Bhu, or means earth, mandala. And then above the earth, there's two other planetary systems in between us and the heavenly planets. And above the heavenly planets, there's 4 other planetary systems. Down below the earth, there's another 7, so 7 plus 7 is 14. Cosmology, what this exhibit is going to show is the sun is moving in a clockwise direction every day, 360 degrees, full circle. Anyway, it's interesting, I won't go into it so much. And then as the sun moves through the constellations of stars, because the constellation of stars like the Big Dipper, etc., is above it, horizontally in the structure of the universe. And where the sun is in relation to the Big Dipper can tell you the season. And then the sun has moving above it, but moving more at a slower speed, is the moon. And this moon also passes through constellations within the period of 28 days, 2 weeks. That's the calendar of, the phases of the moon. Not so long ago there was a full moon. And then now it's phasing down. So anyway, it has the Vedic picture of cosmology is going to be displayed in this planetary. I'm going to show you a little video, but it's all centered around the movements of the sun and where the sun moves in relation to all the other planetary systems. Here's a description. This is now about just more than I need to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyways, about time. It describes that the sun moves from the center of this Bhumandala, like, not literally, but like on a axis that has a big wheel that moves and is riding on the axis, moving in a clockwise direction. And so you're going to see that shortly. This is a little video. I hope the technology works. Sometimes it does. And it's going to, this is a narrator. This is the fellow that's designing this moving planetarium, depicting the Vedic picture of the universe. And you'll see something, he's mentioning the sun, the movements of the sun, where it is in the structure of the universe. He's going to start at the very bottom and then work his way up. And then layers of the universe, then what's beyond the layers of the universe is the spiritual sky. Within the spiritual sky, there's spiritual planets. And that's where yoga is meant to take us, to those places. I hope it works.
The very center of Bhagavad Gita is Mount Meru. The planetary display, we have Shesha holding up the earth. This is Shesh, the empowered incarnation. There we have Ananta speaking Bhagavatam to the four Kumaras. And above, the 7 subterranean planets. Here we can see Jambalu, the central island of Bhumandala, and Varshas showed on the southern side of that. It's 8 other Varshas, with the Yalabhata Varsha in the center, various supporting mountains with large trees upon the described in Srimad Bhagavatam. In the very center of Yalabhata Varsha is Mount Meru, the Golden Mountain. On top of Mount Meru are the cities of important demigods, Lord Brahma in the center, 8 Dipalas in the cardinal directions and some directions. Moving out, you can see the broad Bhumandala, 7 concentric islands and oceans surrounding them. The 7th of these islands is Pushkar. On that island is Manasota mountain. On the mountain there is various cities of demigods such as Indra. Out further is Loka mountain. These large elephants stand atop Loka mountain to balance Bhumandala. Outside of Loka mountain is Aloka Varsha, which is dark. The rays of the sun and the other luminaries extend up to Loka mountain. On Manasota mountain here on Pushkar Peak, the sun travels above this mountain at the southernmost point of its annual orbit. Above Bhumandala is Guvaloka, which is the residence of the Charanas, Siddhas, Yakshas, Gandharvas. And above there is Swargaloka, beginning from the sun and extending up to the pole star Dhruvaloka. This is the moving part of the planetary display. resides on Nandashesh. Moving up beyond them, we have Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka. In this video, we haven't included many of the details for there. From Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, we have residences of the Lord, such as Lord Varaha, and Vana, and so on. Is Brahmaloka, on Brahmaloka, we also have a form of the Lord, Bhagavad Vishnu, as the Sahasrashesha Purush. Beyond there is the seven coverings of the universe, earth, water, fire, etc. And outside the universe is the abode of Lord Shiva, Shiva Loka. There he resides eternally. Beyond Shiva Loka, we come to Mahavishnu, Karana Dakshaya Vishnu, the innumerable universes that have emanated from the pores of his transcendental body. Here you can see him being served by Rama Devi. Then we come to the Brahmajyoti, the effulgence of the Lord's transcendental body. Penetrating through the Brahmajyoti, we come to the Vaikuntha planets. We're showing 24 planets of the Vaikuntha realm in this model. The Lord, with four arms, is holding the conch, disc, club, and lotus, and the various combinations of those four make 24. Then we come to Goloka Vrindavan. Here we can see Radha Madhava, but we'll also be showing the other primary rasas. Krishna with cowherd boys, Krishna being served, Krishna with Mother Yashoda. So this is an overview of the planetary display to be shown in the main dome of the temple.
So that's a lot, lots of names and things. I thought I would show it anyways, because I was briefed. The audience here are not well versed in Vedic texts and things like that, but it's a mind expanding. Minimally, this system of yoga teaches, the whole of the Vedic texts teach the world in which we live, how it's structured, how it works, and different destinations. Yeah, the soul leaving this body at some point in time is going to go somewhere, and the consciousness that we carry is going to determine where that somewhere is. And the higher the consciousness, the higher the destination. And the whole of the yoga system is to make that consciousness fixed in the spiritual dimension, even while we're moving on the physical dimension. So we try to align the physical to who we really are, and the place where we really belong. So yoga is to carry us to that higher destination of consciousness. And Bhagavad Gita is a nice manual to teach ABC. Like, how does it work? How are we supposed to use this human form of life according to the yoga systems, where we're in alignment with who we really are, and we're in alignment with what the place of higher consciousness is that we're part of, and to move our lives in that direction. That's just sharing. And there's some copies of Bhagavad Gita on the table. If you're interested, you can take a copy with you. Let's see if there's some discussion. I don't know if it was introductory enough. I called Bailey on the way over, what should I do? Introductory. So I went beyond introductory. My apologies if I lost people. The time is really interesting. It fascinates me because we're all moved by it. Like, what is it? How do you understand it? How does it bring things into being? How does it work? How does it make things destroyed after time? And the planetarium is centered around the sun, is the movements of the sun as it moves in our universe. And one can go up or one can go down, depending upon your consciousness. So maybe you all go up. Let's see if there's some discussion.
I have a question.
Yes.
When when you first started getting into all of this, did you ever feel overwhelmed or overly existential?
Or what was the other
Like
option?
existential? Like, did you ever feel overwhelmed with existential?
Existential?
Yeah.
No. I have a, my nature is, I'm curious, and I like adventure. So it was a big adventure. I would say if there was some conflict inside, it was before I was doing something else, and now I'm doing this. So I might be betraying that something else that I was doing before and being disrespectful, that was those kind of things. It wasn't existential exactly. It was, the connection to loyalties that I had before, convictions and ways of life and so forth and so on. I resolved that easily. It took, it hit a peak, but it got resolved by those values that I held before. I'm now living them better than I was before. That wasn't a doubt, but there was an attachment to the way that it looked before, than as opposed to, the form and expression of it today. In response to your question, something that kind of prompted all of this for me was, there's some history, but there are three things. There's a higher reality. I'm fully confident there's a higher reality. Second, I don't know what it is. Third, I want to know. And that was the fuel of my tank. And as I went forward, I found there were doorways to more understanding of these things, this existential word, existences that were of this higher realm that I never even saw before. And so I started asking those questions. And then I walked through the door and there's like a whole other thing going on. And then keep walking, and then there's more doors and more things on the other side. It was a fantastic adventure. I wasn't freaked out or wasn't overloaded or something. Because I moved my nature, as I go cautiously, but adventuresomely. So it was a blast. Yes.
So, in the Gita, Krishna talks often about the gunas, and you mentioned that.
Yes.
That it's throughout.
Yes. And more
And
verses in Gita on that
yeah.
topic than anything else.
And in all different circumstances, when Arjuna is stressing out, hey, the gunas, and then when he's describing the supreme being,
Yes.
he describes it in relation to Prakriti, and then later at the end in the ways by which one should live. And so from your standpoint, like how does one relate to the gunas on a daily basis?
That's an unusual, it's a good question, but it's not one that people normally ask.
I don't know how does
It's okay,
yeah.
it's okay. A simple answer is, depending upon how much evolved your consciousness is to know who you are, you can see it happening, the modes of nature, there's this mode, that mode, the other mode. It's very interesting, very colorful, and it's not me. So you can see through the lens of knowledge that arises when there's detachment. Supposing you don't have the lens of knowledge, you're caught up in the experience of this mode. Someone's being nice, someone's being mean, someone's being this, and someone's being that. There's a nice dog and there's a barking dog that's going to bite me. So then there's feeling that along with the modes. So when the stronger the awareness of who and the deeper sense of who you really are, the spiritual sense of who you really are, then you can see it just happening in varieties of ways. The modes are manifesting in varieties of ways. Pandita Samadarshana, in the language of Bhagavad Gita. Pandit, you know, the learned person. Sama means same or equal. Darshan is to see. A learned person is one who sees things equally. They see the variety, gives a list, and there's the sameness. Amongst the diversity, there's unity. The unity is the soul. And look at this diversity. So you can see with detachment. When there is detachment, you can see with knowledge. The two go together, knowledge and detachment. And here's an even nicer message. It's connected with the Bhakti Yoga studio here. Bhakti naturally gives rise to both. That is to say, within the soul, there's already existing knowledge. It's just covered. And when that knowledge awakens, when the light goes on, then there's detachment from darkness. So knowledge and detachment arise from bhakti. So when it becomes elevated in bhakti, yoga, that you're back to your question, how do you see the modes? It's just material nature moving in diverse ways. I'm not like, oh, it's yummy, or I hate it. It's just, it is what it is, and that's not me. No, you can act appropriately with each situation, differently, and that's a behavior, but it's not who you are either. And there are Christians saying, forgive that you don't blame the sinner, but the sin. Don't couple the two together. You can be forgiving of the soul that does something mean or hurtful or harsh or violent or whatever, but it doesn't condemn the soul, because the behavior is just the modes of nature acting. And conversely, on the other side, it's the modes of nature acting. So does it agree that so the soul, identification with the soul has everything to do with connection with the Supreme, the Source? That's spiritual consciousness. That's yoga. And it's as it matures.
Can I add on to that?
Sure.
So I love what you were saying about time, and I hear a lot on social media that Saturn has changed signs, which is interesting, right? Because it's based on Western astrology, which says that the sun doesn't move, right? We think the sun doesn't move.
Heliocentric, geocentric.
Yeah, but the sun actually does move.
Oh, yes.
And in Jyotish astrology, they take that into consideration.
Oh, it's central.
And it actually is what we see. So if we did look at Saturn right now, we wouldn't see that that Pisces was behind it. We would see Aquarius behind it. But we all talk about it. It's so interesting.
Well, here's a response to what you just said. Relativity. The Vedic picture is from the point of observation. The Western, from Copernicus onward, the sun is at the center, not the point of observation. So both modern astronomy and Vedic astronomy can calculate, for example, astronomical events like a solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, very precisely. Both. One's this and the other's that. So it's relativity. There's different models depending upon, the point of observation. So both work. They definitely work. But then, how does some people poo-poo the Vedic model because, oh, come on, the flat earth, notion, but it's not, anyway. Bhumandala is a mandala. It's just a way of, there's a way, I won't go into it. It's a very simple explanation.
Well, it was fun seeing that, and thank you.
Okay. Anyone? Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your presentation. And my question is, so we learn from texts like Srimad Bhagavatam and things that we move through millions of different forms of life, passing through different lifetimes
Yes.
and things. And the human form of life is unique because it's the only form of life in which we can inquire into the true nature of the self, the true self. And we learn that that's the purpose of the human form of life.
Yes.
So what are practical ways, sort of everyday, nuts and bolts kind of level that we can do that to inquire into the true nature?
Well, the hyperlinked PDF will help, and anybody that wants to do that, because when you start living life, there's problems, and how do you address those problems? Because often life goes into problem solving and away from higher purposes. So that's one answer to your question. By being familiar with Bhagavad Gita and how to address problems that come simply by the fact we have a body and a mind, or a gross and a subtle body. But practical, the practices, or abhyasa, the practices of awakening that higher consciousness, it's largely based in sound. So there are two expressions of sound that are particularly effective. One is what we did at the beginning, this musical mantra meditation. Another form of mantra meditation is something you can do just by yourself. You don't have to be musical. That's using meditation beads. Beads just help tactile sense, auditory sense, locative sense. You connect those senses to that sound. So mantra meditation is a practical way that removes coverings of forgetfulness and awakens the consciousness of remembrance of who we really are, etc. Sound through sound. The whole of the Vedic process rests on sound, and there are things that can help that, and there's things that but that's the thing. It's the sound vibration. And then the second, in addition to mantra, is the texts. The texts are there to guide our activity. So if you become familiar with Bhagavad Gita, for example, then you can know whether to turn left or turn right, what direction to move in. That's going to lead you to that place of higher consciousness. Back to the question, there's a higher reality. And I don't know what it is, and I want to know. So Bhagavad Gita helped me get the configuration right, so I have a better idea than I did before what that place of higher consciousness is. So it's that higher reality, and how to move towards that higher reality. They go together. They're both based on sound, recorded sound in a text, and explanations to help people understand it. And then, so the text guides your activity, and the mantra makes the heart pure. The heart that's pure, that isn't guided, can be, misdirected. And I may have knowledge, but if my heart's not pure, then I'm not going to go very far. At least not in the right direction. Anything else? Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. And mine kind of piggybacks off Barb's question a little bit, but obviously the first kind of steps when it comes to the gunas is recognizing and starting to realize when those different modes are at play. But I guess my question would be, even just personally, if you find yourself in a state that's majestic or tamastic, is the answer to like observe with compassion, wait for it to pass, or is there actually things that one can do to shift towards a more sattvic or perhaps above state? Like, is there anything you can do when you do recognize that you're in, one of the gunas that you may want to?
So let me say back in simple terms. You see someone is influenced by a lower mode, and you're just supposed to be passive observer of that, or you're supposed to do something.
I mean the self. So like if you can observe yourself in that mode,
okay.
Is there something, like, is the answer to just kind of be like, okay, I'm being majestic right now? Or is it, are there things that one should do to kind of try to move beyond those
Sure.
things?
Okay. So this is introspective. I see this lower nature at work. Is there something I can do besides just observe it? Turn on the light. And to say turn on the light, that means cultivate in the moment. You cultivate making choices that lead towards light. So I know what they're, because you have a Bhagavad Gita in front of you, so you have some idea what light is, and you turn your attention there. You try to turn, so that lower mode is going to hold you back and say other things besides go to light. But if there's a desire to not be, the first is the recognition that this lower mode is acting right now. But introspective people can see it happening. Those that aren't introspective, they're not seeing it happening, they're just moved by it. So you're seeing it happening. Now what can I do? You can take your mantra and call loudly your mantra, or softly your mantra, but sound can help turn the light on. And in the moment is one thing, and then overall, let me see what the quality of goodness looks like from the Bhagavad Gita perspective, and let me move in that direction. It's not the answer for in the moment, it's the answer for a lifestyle that's more in the mode of goodness. That's very nicely described. A big one is nonviolence. Don't act in a way that's going to cause pain and suffering to others. It doesn't mean you have to go ahead and inflict pain upon yourself. Don't cause pain and suffering to others. That's a mode of goodness principle, and it's a principle to live by. So supposing, let's just say, the thing that's coming is anger. It's a dark cloud. But I'm not going to release this anger and hurt someone, because a lot of that goes on. So I'm not going to do that. So what do I do with that energy? That's the question. Step back. This is a mode of goodness gesture. You go into reflective space. Just see. So it's detachment. Just see how this has impacted me, at least at this time. And I don't want to say yes to this. You're making choices in that reflective space. What's a choice I can make that's not that one? Then you do some brainstorming. In other words, you have freedom where intelligence is operating. Instead of just being reactive, you're being reflective, which is mode of goodness. And I can make some other choices besides just being reactive, or going with the flow of that lower nature thing, lower mode of nature thing. And so here's some things that I know that I can connect with easily. Let me do some of that.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you're making choice. You're choosing a mode of goodness because you've gone into the reflective mode instead of the reactive mode. That's one thing you can do. Another is you have a close friend, and you turn to a close friend, and you say help. Somebody that knows you, and they're not going to judge you and try to control you, manipulate you, or anything like that. They just, they're the mirror,
And they're adding strength to your strength. You're giving strength to where the higher nature of you wants to go. That's another, it's called sadhu sangha, association with saintly people. They're detached, they're wise, and they're just going to give that wisdom, and more light goes into your life instead of that other thing that's impressing on you, because you're being introspective, you see it. And then in general, the incubation chamber is mold your life in the quality of goodness. The choices you make, food choices, speech choices, move in that direction. And then it becomes easier as your life moves in that direction. The cultivation. Anyone else? I hope it's been meaningful, not irrelevant group here. Okay, so looks like we're finished. What's next?
Would you like to lead us in a closing kirtan? Is that possible?
She's really good.
Okay.
They came all the way from New Jersey.
You
Just
did?
In a snowstorm.
Yeah.
But the family of three, the wife is still home doing what the wife is doing, but they are very kind and have some affection for one another, and this is their function. They come for that purpose, so come and do your thing.